WSAV News 3 has uncovered evidence that Chatham County Sheriff Al St. Lawrence may not be performing his functions under the Georgia state constitution. And upon investigating, we've received varying...
I retain the right to ask the questions that I want to ask.
No, you don't. You can leave the building. I retain the right to kick you out.
...and sometimes bizarre responses. The revelations come after months of examining the details in the deaths of 4 men in custody of the Chatham County Jail last year, and pending lawsuits against the county and their third-party healthcare provider, Kartunen Correctional Healthcare. The housing and care of inmates is one of the sheriff's assigned duties.
Yeah, I just need to go to the hospital.
In February, when News 3 aired the disturbing jailhouse recordings made by Matthew Laughlin before his death last year, a sheriff's spokesman said it would be weeks before the sheriff could be interviewed on the topic, but gave no explanation as to why. When we asked if he was performing his constitutional duties, we were referred to Chatham County Attorney Jonathan Hart, who did not respond. But the day our story of Laughlin's recordings aired, Sheriff's Deputy Mark Capers was fired from the jail for excessive use of force. 2 days before that, another jail deputy, Dion Gibson, was fired after being charged with sexual assault in the jail. News 3 obtained their personnel files and could not find any document that demonstrates the sheriff participated in those firings, and his signature is not at the bottom of any of their termination paperwork, even though firing deputies is another responsibility of sheriffs in Georgia. And when new jail deputies graduated in March, spokesperson Gina Bilbo told the assembled crowd the sheriff was quote-unquote under the weather and could not attend. So there was no swearing in of the new deputies, another function of the sheriff.
You're not hijacking him.
No,
You're not
I'm not
hijacking him.
And when we asked for an explanation, the response was hostile.
He's a
You're not
constitutionally
doing
elected
this.
officer.
Yes, and you can talk to our lawyer, as I've told you.
When will the oath of office be administered? Because he's the only... In the morning.
You're welcome to come see it.
We can. What time?
The outburst included professional threats, and a deputy escorted me from the building. The next day, instead of letting us attend the swearing-in as promised, they distributed this still photo of the sheriff from behind, performing the oath.
And you see Chief Al St. Lawrence there.
But if the odd angle of the photograph had anything to do with the sheriff's appearance, it did not show a week later on St. Patrick's Day, where the sheriff has been a staple for more than a half-century. Which brings us to last Wednesday, when Judge Penny Haas-Friesman ordered the sheriff to submit to a deposition in a legal fight over documents in the inmate death cases. At the deposition, less than 24 hours later, the sheriff was a no-show. When we asked why, his spokesman Bilbo said she wasn't aware of a deposition. His chief deputy wouldn't comment on pending litigation and said the deposition was canceled. Then he said it was postponed and referred us to the county attorney. And when we confronted County Attorney Jonathan Hart on Friday of last week...
Do we have order?
No.
I'm concerned the sheriff is not performing his constitutional duties. I think my question is pretty simple. You haven't returned my phone calls or my emails, and you didn't show up to a deposition yesterday.
For the record, the Chatham County Commission has no power over the sheriff's office. Chairman Al Scott, quote, "The Chatham County Sheriff is an elected constitutional officer. My responsibility is budgetary only. Therefore, it would not make any sense for me to comment on non-budgetary matters," unquote. Other than the voters of Chatham County, the only person who wields any power over the duties of the sheriff is Georgia Governor Nathan Deal. The law allows Deal to appoint the state attorney general and 2 other sheriffs to investigate whether a sheriff is capable of performing the functions of his office. We notified the governor's office of our plans to air this story and asked them to comment upon its conclusion. We'll let you know what they say. I'm Dave Kartunen, WSAV News 3.
News 3's Dave Kartunen has been on this story since the very beginning.
District Attorney Meg Heap and Sheriff Al St. Lawrence contend they are not required to release the video of Matthew Ajabade's death in the Chatham County Jail because it is part of a criminal investigation. The Georgia Open Records Act says, quote, "Public disclosure shall not be required for records that are records of law enforcement in any pending investigation." But the law then goes on to say, this paragraph shall not apply to records in the possession of an agency that is the subject of the pending investigation, unquote. Both the GBI and the sheriff's own internal affairs unit investigated the jail in Ajabade's death. Therefore, WSAV and its attorneys have argued that video of events leading up to Ajabade's death must be produced under Georgia law. However important, this is only a part of WSAV's efforts over the past 6 months to obtain documents and video related to the 4 inmate deaths. In November, we asked for communications between the jail and its healthcare provider, Kartunen. The law requires a response in 3 days. They took 56, and then only to deny our entire request, but not before forwarding a message from Sheriff's Major Russell Smith, which claims, quote, the email system is not backed up individually, unquote. The Georgia Records Act requires a clear retention policy of public documents. Then, when WSAV requested this video, which shows the transport of inmate Donald Johnson, who also died in custody, we were initially denied again, told this video was also part of an investigation, even though that investigation had concluded 9 days earlier.
Yeah, I just need to go to the hospital.
We also showed you the gut-wrenching jailhouse video of Matthew Laughlin pleading to be taken to the hospital before his death in custody of congestive heart failure last April. When Chatham County produced that video, we expected 2 other jail visits even closer in time to Laughlin's death. But those 2 video files were corrupted. The county has provided no explanation. Meantime, that young man's family has sued Chatham County over their own requests for records they say the county has not provided them. When it was time for Sheriff St. Lawrence to be deposed in that case, he was a no-show. And when we confronted the sheriff's attorney, Chatham County Attorney Jonathan Hart,
I think my question is pretty simple. You haven't returned my phone calls or my emails, and you didn't show up to a deposition yesterday.
And yet, just Thursday, the lawyers for Laughlin's family finally received more than 500 emails they had requested. Those emails were provided to WSAV Friday, months after we were told they could not be recovered.
Friday was another day the Chatham County Attorney's Office had set as a deadline for themselves to produce some of the records we've requested over the past 6 months. If they do produce more information, we'll look through it and let you know what we find. I'm Dave Kartunen, WSAV News 3.
Chilling new developments in the case of a Chatham County inmate who died in custody last spring. First a whistleblower suit, then a $15 million wrongful death claim. And tonight, News 3 has obtained jailhouse recordings of that inmate pleading for medical help. News 3's Dave Kartunen breaks these new details.
They say I got a bad heart.
You what?
They say I got a bad heart.
I just got a call.
And they won't take me to the hospital. I'm dying in here.
A horrifying voice from the grave predicting his own death. Chatham County inmate Matthew Laughlin, arrested last spring on nonviolent drug charges, calling his mother and father in intervals 3 weeks after his arrest.
Why won't they take you to the hospital?
I don't know. It hurts so bad.
Laughlin's parents have filed a $15 million claim with the county and the sheriff, alleging the authorities, along with their contracted healthcare provider Kartunen, neglected Laughlin's pleadings for medical care as he suffered from congestive heart failure.
I'm coughing up blood. My feet are swollen. It hurts.
I know, Matthew. I know what is wrong with you. I told you this would happen. I love you, Matthew. They're going to cut us off.
I love you too. I'm gonna die in here.
And it wasn't just Laughlin's parents who were pleading to get him transported to the hospital. 3 healthcare workers, 2 nurses, and a doctor who worked for Kartunen have filed a First Amendment whistleblower suit alleging that the company and county authorities ignored their pleas to get him transferred to Memorial Hospital.
You feel helpless. You feel like, you know, these weeks that you're fighting to get these people out, you know, doing the best you can. It just doesn't feel good.
The nurse who spoke to News 3 says they eventually used a loophole to get Laughlin taken to the hospital, where he went into shock and was declared brain dead all on the same day. Just days before his transport and death, his father gets to visit him in the jail. Laughlin keeps his eyes closed for long stretches and weeps.
All right, Dad, I love you too. I'm sorry for everything.
Hey, call me if you can, and I don't know what Brother Banks has in mind, but we're going to see what we can do to maybe get you some help, medical help or something, okay?
Yeah, I just need to go to the hospital.
I'm Dave Kartunen, WSAV News 3.
Well, the Chatham County Sheriff's Office said Sheriff L. St. Lawrence was not available for comment. Kartunen did send us this statement. It says, well, state and federal privacy laws prohibit us from discussing the details of an individual's care or medical condition. We know many of the allegations made are untrue. This patient was given ongoing care at the correctional facility, then transported to a local hospital where more than a week later he passed away. We stand behind our medical team.